So there was this meme from a while ago that I honestly never understood. At one point, there was a moment when the internet decided to pick a certain someone as the most hated cartoon character that people should go and let out all their anger by making sadistic memes to take him down. And that character is the baby from Ice Age? I mean, I guess he can be annoying, as babies are, and did put the main characters in harm's way many times, but he's just a baby. What's the reason for people to make all these hate memes and give him a serious backlash as if he's openly a white nationalist? What's next? Are people gonna make a hate mob against Boo from Monsters, Inc.? But other than its lack of legitimate explanation to the heavy amount of hate, the reason why I don't get this meme is because I say this as someone who has seen every single Ice Age movie. And I can tell you that this baby is precious compared to some other characters throughout this franchise. In fact, I can name you 10 characters or groups of them that deserve to be punished for ruining the reputation of the Ice Age franchise. Think the baby is bad? Well, let me tell ya. I'm Animat, and these are the top 10 Ice Age characters worse than the baby. I know this is technically all about Ice Age, but let me start off by talking about another animated franchise, Despicable Me. I'm sure everybody watching this are quite familiar with the Minions, but with how big and popular they were, there's no surprise that there would be tons of ripoffs that would follow. There was a time when some animated films tried their hands on their own gibbering clones in order to capitalize on their cute goofiness just like Illumination did. In the case of Ice Age, specifically in their fourth film, Continental Drift, they tried to make their own Minion ripoffs with the Hyrax, a bunch of little gerbils that eventually aid the trio in order to take down the pirates. Now, while they are Minion ripoffs and can get annoying, I will be fair and say they don't appear in the film enough to really get under your skin. But if I have to explain why they're on this list, it's honestly because of one joke.
May I try?
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Wugga, 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 wugga. Pooda, 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 pooda.
That they got?
Oh, so in order to communicate with them, you must perform one of the lowest forms of comedy next to puns. I now despise everything about them. Now I know, technically, this is not the first time Sid pulled this stunt, since he did it before in the second film with a group of little sloths. But it doesn't help the case of the Hyrax because 1, this gag was already done, and 2, again, their intentions are to rip off the Minions. Maybe the pirates did have the better idea and treat them like what they deserve.
Now get this chunk of ice seaworthy by sundown, or I will keelhaul the lot of you!
Let's be honest, Ice Age isn't really the best when it comes to making villains. Sure, some can have good things to say about Diego's old gang in the first, but the rest of the other villains in the later films are just... not the worst things about the movies, but not really all that memorable. But then you have the Dino Birds, easily the worst villains in all of the Ice Age films. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more I realize that they're in the wrong animated franchise. Seriously, think about it. They're talking dinosaurs, they're more carnivorous and want to eat dino eggs, and have a grudge against one of the heroes who stopped them from foiling their egg-napping plans. These aren't Ice Age characters, these villains belong in a Land Before Time sequel! All they need is just one stupid musical number and they're all set to take on Littlefoot and the gang. Then again, Buck already did the job for them.
I am the precise protector of this lost world. But my friends call me Buck.
Well played, guys.
Since the fifth film already had too many characters involved, and they are facing a giant meteor that's going to destroy everything, this movie is most likely better off without any additional Dino Dodos.
Son, sometimes I wonder how you snuck into this family.
One of the most cliched things a sequel could do is to give a prominent character a love interest. If it never happened in the predecessor, then why not fix it in the new movie? Ellie from the second film, The Meltdown, is an exception that actually works in the context of the franchise, since it was established that Manny is a lonely character with no family, nor doesn't even know if there are other mammoths alive. So it makes sense that he deserves the most to have some company. Sid and Diego, on the other hand, there's not much of a point to give them girlfriends. Not to say that they don't deserve love, except for Sid, but seriously, what's the purpose of Shira and Brooke? We already went through the love story with Manny, but then in the later films, they try to repeat it again with the other two. Since they are low on the list, it obviously means that they're not among the worst. But what makes them bad is what they symbolize in the franchise. They represent how in Continental Drift and Collision Course, that's when Ice Age really ran out of ideas and had to resort to recycling their old plot points in order to fill in their respective films' running time. The girls themselves ain't that cringy, but it's just their point is not for love, they're just using the franchise to buy some time.
You guys are like the start of a bad joke.
As you could tell, most of these characters will be from either Continental Drift or Collision Course, since those are the films that really set Ice Age off the rails as a franchise, and the ones that even made the crew at Blue Sky Studios feel sick and tired of all these movies. In fact, one of the biggest problems with this film series is that they don't remove characters. They just keep adding on with every film they make. And by the time the fifth movie came out, that's when there are just way too many comic reliefs to handle, and any more would make you feel like your head is going to burst. That is essentially what happened when the film introduced the Shangri-Lama, the head honcho of Geotopia, whose purpose is to find the one type of gag that hasn't been covered by everyone else. Everybody's got their own style of comedy to go with their personality, so the only thing the llama can do is using yoga as an excuse to make funny poses.
Caterpillar! Funky chicken, bouncing Betty, mashed potato!
Hey, this is kinda easy!
Downward dog!
Ah yes, the downward dog. And how fitting that Collision Course was released in 2016, since that seemed to be the favorite position for animated films during that year. Listen, it's already enough that we had to deal with all these recurring clowns. This llama's contribution of twisting himself is no help at all!
Thank you so much, doofus!
Now, I've already covered the other girlfriends whom, despite not fully hateable themselves, it's their purpose that makes them frustrating. But, at the very least, they don't drag down the characters to make them worse than they were before. However, there was one that did. Right in the middle of the franchise in Dawn of the Dinosaurs, there was a moment when Scrat fell in love.
You'll never find.
Even in the later films, Scrat is debatably the one saving grace of the franchise. While the story with the trio kept continuously sinking, Scrat and his cartoony shenanigans with his acorn helped keep Ice Age a bit afloat to make the films tolerable at most. Like, hey, the main plot sucks, but at least the squirrel is still funny, and we later discover that with his acorn, not only does he have the ability to split giant glaciers, but he is also responsible for forming the continents of the world and create our galaxy as we know it. So, in other words, Scrat is God. Yes, our Lord is actually a man who chases nuts. But in the third film, all that running for the acorn was completely replaced by a bunch of the same tiresome relationship jokes, resulting in some of the weakest and dullest Scrat moments. It's one thing to change a character's personality because of love, but making the funniest character of the franchise not funny is a true crime that should not go unpunished. Besides, Scrat should not be chasing for women. He's the kind of guy that nuts for nuts. Okay, I need you to sit down for this one because this is a big one. And when I say big, I mean one of the movie's most recognizable characters. It's Sid. Now, I know, there are many people out there who really like Sid, and he can have some really funny moments in the first film, which is exactly why this is not really what you think. I'm not counting Sid in general, but rather Sid after the first film. Yes, being the optimistic, empty-headed comic relief was fun in the original, especially when hanging out with Manny and Diego, who could barely stand him. But when he has to pull off that same shtick in every movie by acting like an idiot again and again and again and again, along with interacting with other characters that can be as clueless as him, that whole bit gets old real quick. In fact, it gets so bad that he becomes a virus where some characters he plays around with end up becoming as hateable as him, which was how the Hyrax and Brooke found themselves on this list in the first place. It's kind of funny how there's this smooth transition on how people would feel about Sid when watching all the films. They would go from laughing at Manny when he hangs around with Sid to feeling exactly like Manny when he hangs around with Sid.
You gotta make a...
Wow, my wish came true.
I'm okay!
Mine too.
If you've seen all the movies, then you know that Manny goes through many of the main steps in life with a partner. He falls in love, he has a kid named Peaches, she grows up, and then has to learn to let her go when she found love. In the fourth film, they established this shy little hedgehog who was Peach's longtime friend to be her potential lover, but I guess he's forever in the friend zone and now she's engaged to some weird guy named Julian.
Oh, hey, bro, Dad. You here to rock out? Ba-boom, 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 boom, boom.
Oh boy, this Julian fellow. How to describe this guy? Do you remember Johnny from Hotel Transylvania? Remember how he's pretty much Andy Samberg, but suck out everything that's funny about him and replace it all with just pure cringe? Oh, and add a little bit of that Logan and Jake Paul attitude just to spice up his annoyance? Well, turn him into a mammoth and you pretty much got Julian. While not prominently featured in the movie, thank the Lord Scrat, but every time he opens his mouth and talks to Manny, his dialogue always sounds like, "Hey, what's happening, dude? I'm totally boning your daughter. High five, bro!" You'd think it's enough for Manny to deal with Sid's stupidity alone, but now with Julian in the mix when he'll become his son-in-law, I just can't help but feel sorry for the guy. Like, if the franchise wouldn't die because the movies were getting progressively worse, then at least end it for Manny just so he could have a break from being surrounded by idiots.
I can feel your heart beating.
Okay, that's enough of that.
I know it's already enough that I put Sid on this list, but hey, on the bright side for him, he's only in the middle of it all, and, believe it or not, he's not the worst sloth in the Ice Age world. The only catch, though, is that the sloths that are worse than him are his family.
Oh, my whole familia.
Now, I'm not saying that they're worse than him because they're even dumber and more annoying. They're considered worse because they are horrible people, because they seem to often have the tendency to just abandon family members. When it was established in the first film, some could interpret that they just forgot. But when they returned in Continental Drift, it was confirmed that they do that on purpose, always abandoning family members that they consider a weak link and get as far away from them as possible. And it's not just Sid either. They also later dump his grandma with no remorse about it.
Oh, we're headed inland, and Granny is just dead weight.
I get it, Sid can be intolerable at times, but what kind of family throws out their own members like a pile of garbage just because they might be holding them back? This is obviously a family that has no problem killing each other just because they benefit more without them. Especially the mom, who seems like the kind that would protest in the street with guns in her hands because she's so desperate for a haircut. But it really goes to show that sometimes there There are worse things in life than annoying characters.
That's just crazy. That's just my family.
Among all the characters in the Ice Age franchise, Buck is probably one of the toughest for filmmakers to handle. Yes, his personality is very much wild and extreme, but it's not impossible to make him likable. In his debut of Dawn of the Dinosaurs, he can be a lot of fun and enjoyable to show the herd the hidden land of the dinos. But when given to the wrong hands, like when he returned in Collision Course, he can be one of the most intolerable characters in the whole franchise. Everything that made him charming and funny in the third film is now all thrown away, where the film takes his crazy attitude and take it way too far. As he tags along with the herd to find a way to stop the meteors, his over-the-top wacky nature just dominates a good chunk of the movie and now blends in with the crowd in becoming one of the too many comic reliefs that are not needed for this movie. Not to mention that his jokes are insufferable. Like, they're not just unfunny, but they can be bad to the point of being painful.
Well, what? I'm trying! But how do you tell someone they're doomed? He's stumped.
And on top of that, since Ice Age likes to follow trends, Buck is the leader of trying to make this animated film as cartoony as possible. But now it just becomes too cartoony to the point that it's more unbearable than fun. It can happen when just one character can completely ruin an entire movie. But in the case of Collision Course, where there's too many of them to count, at least I could say that taking away Buck would have been a major help.
Now please! We haven't got much time!
What are you waiting for? Kill him!
Out of all the characters throughout the Ice Age movies, this is the one that I immediately think of to be the worst. The one that ever since they made their first appearance, the franchise inevitably went downhill to its demise. Even when making this list, I knew exactly who belonged in the #1 spot. The Ice Age character that deserved the most hate than anyone else, including the baby. Well, actually, it isn't one character, but two, known as Crash and Eddie.
Crash and Eddie reporting for duty. Duty.
These guys are not just one-off characters that popped in during one sequel and that's it. Oh, no. They stuck around the franchise for every single sequel, and all they do is make the same joke that end with the same punchline. They do something stupid, and then they don't learn anything from it because they're unapologetically stupid. That's it! That's their big contribution to all of the Ice Age adventures. Nothing but failed continuous attempts of comedy that's just the kiddie version of Jackass. And you know what's the worst part about them? The worst thing about their existence? The more you think about it, the more you realize how pointless they are. Seriously, their purpose in the films is to be the comic reliefs whose humor depends on their stupidity. But wait a minute, that's Sid's job! Why do we need more characters that would do the same kind of jokes that Sid would do anyways? Is it because they're two and want to make them do things that not even Sid would be dumb enough to try? If memes about hating cartoon characters have to be a thing, especially if it's one from Ice Age, then I cannot think of any more deserving than Crash and Eddie. And unlike the baby, these two would be justifiable as targets because those are the guys who ruined Ice Age. Then again, memes are meant to be stupid and pointless anyway, so what the fridge am I talking about?
Very,
very stupid.